Welcome to the Lifeline, a production of Simply BJE. The goal of this podcast is to build, inspire, and to empower our listeners through conversations on business, leadership, and mental health. We invite you to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and at www.simplybje.com/The Lifeline. Now, let's tune in for today's episode. Top of the day, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this episode of The Lifeline. We're your hosts, life coach and motivational speaker, Bo Powell, and social media influencer, owner of the For Real brand, Lindsberg Petway, and yours truly, leadership coach and mental health advocate, Barry J. Elliott. You can visit us at www.simplybje.com/The Lifeline and on social media at Facebook, Instagram, and now on YouTube. Once again, we have our special guest, CEO of the Saved Period brand and the up-and-coming nonprofit organization, the Manology Project, Quentin Crumbey. Good morning, everybody. How's everybody doing?
Doing pretty good.
Good morning. Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
Good stuff. So last week we had a spirited conversation, we'll say. Very spirited conversation. And just that conversation was the importance of being aware of our history while not getting stuck in the past. And that sounds ironic, but I think it's very necessary. Last week, Bo and Quentin talked about not weaponizing our history. So I think it's worth revisiting. So Bo and Quentin, talk to us a little bit about that and what it means not to weaponize our history.
Go ahead, Bo. You can start us off.
I was going to defer to you, sir. You're the guest.
Okay. Well, I'll start off. Just when talking about just weaponizing our history is really more internal, something that's internal. When situations come up in our culture or in Black America, I just put it like that. Sometimes we tend to just use our history try to use it as a get out of free card for no accountability on what we're doing, right? So, and I'm gonna give you a prime example. So two prime examples. So R. Kelly went to prison, and Diddy is in prison now, right? So it's crazy because they both did some type of criminal act to get to where they're at. But the narrative in our community is they were set up. This was a setup for them, and somebody is trying to do something to them versus they did criminal acts. Now, I'm not saying that somebody may not be after them, right? Mm-hmm. But what I'm saying is that let's start with the criminal act that they did, right?
Right.
Both of these gentlemen did a lot of damage to a lot of women, to a lot of men. And so sometimes we'll use what happened to us back then to now try to justify why something is happening now to a particular person. And it goes off kilter because on some of the platform, I don't know if you guys listen to Dr. Umar, but I just kind of listen to him because sometimes he's all over the place. But he was one of those people who was like really just spewing that information out, which is, oh yeah. And then literally he blew it off like, yeah. They committed crimes and stuff. Yeah, but that's not why they're there. And I'm thinking, and then he went down this history line of what happened to us back in the day on why these guys are acting or behaving the way that they are. And I'm like, that's an internal way of weaponizing and trying to use our history. As great as that history is, with even the slavery, the way we came out, the way we rebuild, I mean, all of that great stuff, this is not a time to use it to justify somebody's choices that they made today at 2025, right? I think these guys have made decisions, they've made choices, and this is what has caught up to them. But to divert, to just automatically go back and say that we were conditioned and this is what they did to us back in the day and all of this stuff, as it means to say that they don't have to have any accountability for the actions that they've done today. Like, this ain't got nothing to do with 1985 or this ain't got nothing to do with 1813. This is today, 2020. You made decisions to go out here and participate in some criminal activities. And there's many things that have happened over the last couple of years that I could put my finger on that had happened, to where we'll just go, oh yeah, there's no fathers in the homes. Yeah, but that we were conditioned back in the day to be A, B, and C. And I'm like, yeah, we were, but it's still a choice to be a father or not to be a father. It's still a choice to be a husband or not to be a husband. So no matter what happened 50 years ago, or 400 years ago, today, there's things in place to actually help you progress forward. And so that is kind of where I was kind of leading that to.
Okay. So real is not weaponizing, it's deflection, is really
No,
what you're talking
or
about.
more deflection. Yeah,
Yeah,
using it
okay.
as a
Got you.
mechanism to not really be held accountable. And I think that slavery had a lot of bad things. It had a lot of good things in it and the good things I'm just talking about is just the way that we talked about this last week was, man, we still powered through a lot of that stuff that was going on back then, and we became stronger. You got all the Black Wall Streets. You got Rosewood that was built up. It was a location out there in Philly that was built up. So we had areas where we had built up the black market, the black culture, the black dollar. I mean, we had a lot of stuff going. Now, mind you, people don't like that, so they came after us. But I think that we have to keep on trying to build that because people. I mean, Lynchburg sent us something today. And it's like you're going to have those type of people in the world. You're not going to be able to get around it. I'm sorry. 400 years of it, you're going to have it. I just don't want us to contribute to it by using it as a tool to not hold us accountable for things that we can actually do to change the tide today.
Absolutely. And I totally agree with that. And, it's, can be considered as a weaponization too, because part of that is to, take something and spread discord amongst a group of people. So it can kind of fall into that. But I would have to agree that even using, and I'll just say for a lack of accountability, to even to use against each other as a way that we can't progress. How often, and sometimes that may not necessarily be a product of, just who we are as people in our community, our culture as Black people. I
Right.
think people tend to do that in general. But because of our challenges that we've had, because of the history that we've had to walk through, oftentimes we feel like because of what's exists that we can't do something.
Right.
And so, you may share something with someone. It's like, oh, they ain't gonna let you do that. Like, well, who gonna stop me? You know what I mean?
Right.
It's a white man's world. Well, who gonna stop me? You know what I'm saying? We're not in that place anymore. And when you just look at by the numbers, when you look at the population of, white folks as compared to people of color, it's changed drastically just over the last 20 something plus years. In 10 or 20 years, the minority will probably be the majority. You know, then what's going to be the excuse, if you will, or the reason why we cannot do something. So for me, that was my point of conversation last week of just taking accountability, not saying that those things do not exist. I think anybody would be a doggone fool to say
Right.
that, these challenges, there are no challenges out there in the world for us to overcome. You'd be foolish to say that. But I think you'd be equally as foolish to say that they still have a stronghold on us today, like they did, 50 years ago.
Right.
Um, and here's the bottom line: you are what you believe, and I think that's speaks to what Quentin is saying. It's an internal thing. To how do we take flip the switch to say, okay, taking a step back and critically thinking through what the reality of it is, because just because you believe something doesn't make it true, but it can be true for you if you allow it to be. And I
Right.
think that is the challenge for us today, is to begin to embrace a new truth about who we are as people. And I appreciate the stories like Six Triple Eight and Hidden Figures, because it starts to speak to the essence of who we are.
Right.
And there's many other stories about the tank brigade that was very influential in World War II. We start to see these examples of who we are. If we start to embrace those truths about our identity and the excellence that we possess, and then at the same time embrace the truth that, hey, because of that, despite the challenges, we can still progress. I think now we can start making some difference in our community.
Right. And I think
Okay.
that's where it has to be. That's where we have to land at is that,
Hmm.
and you just look at us four brothers right now, right, for what we're trying to do in our own personal communities, and then starting to work together to actually achieve one common goal, right? And the more we do that, then the more we can actually change the way that men are approaching marriage, right? I saw something that said, "Why are not men asking to be married anymore? Why they're not pursuing marriage anymore?" Well, the reasons why were pretty silly, right? But I think that it's really because marriage is not talked about in a positive way. It's only talked about in a terrible way. And even men that have great relationships with their wives in a community of men will still kind of crack a quick joke or two, right? It's like, yeah, but you know, my wife, little ball and chain, ha, 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 ha. And it's like, dude, you're literally not helping the cause if and you're just trying to crack a joke, but we do that in the midst of company, but it doesn't help the guy that actually does, like Bo said, he believes it. You're just cracking a joke about it, but he literally believes that she's a ball and chain. And who else can stamp that approval than a man who's married for 28 years or 30 years also says that, yeah, the old ball and chain at home. That's internally. That's something that we do. That's the barbershop talk, right? I mean, we are kind of out of the barbershop, but when we used to go to the barbershop, that's what barbershop talk was. It was a bunch of hoopla, boobity blah. You know, it's like, what are we talking about in here? But we participated in it, but now we're mature, and now we just understand that that's not the right way that we should be talking,
Well,
even around our young men and stuff. So,
I disagree with two things. Because number one, I'll start with the marriage thing because I think it's more than just the negative talk. I think we have a generation of men who don't have the image of family anymore because family is not prioritized in our community. So we have a group of men
right,
that
that's
they
true.
see their parents shacking, as the old people would say. They don't see, and they see, and for some boys, because I've had conversations when I was in education, they've seen multiple partners with their parents coming out of the house. So they don't have a concept of family. So you can really only project or do what you're exposed to. So some of that is a lack of exposure.
True.
The second thing about the barbershop, it really depends on the context because in the barbershop I went to, and this is probably one of the reasons why you guys got act so old. My barber was 50 and 60 years old. So we heard a lot of mature conversations, a lot of philosophical conversations. So the barbershop conversation was not always bad. A lot of it was really thought-provoking. And for a lot of men, that's where they received their therapy. And it
Yeah.
was healthy therapy.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think and I think I like how you brought that up because I did both. Uh, my dad had us when we were younger. We used to go to, the guy was like 65 or 60, something like that. And you're right. So it was very thoughtful. I mean, he challenged every young man that walked in. You couldn't have your pants sagging. You couldn't, no, there was literally no swearing at all. You couldn't come in there
Exactly.
with that music bumping. When you pulled your car up in front of his shop, you had to turn your radio down. Like he demanded all of this stuff. But just remember though, those guys are gone. So now you look on here now and you look at this new generation of young guys who are cutting hair today. These are the young guys that you just said that are in homes that had parents shacking up, no real responsibility, no father, no nothing. But then they're in there talking to young boys. Your son's going in there, and that's what he's hearing is from boys who are already missing all these pieces and components to make themselves whole. But they're talking as if this is truth. And if your
Right.
young man doesn't have a father at home, if another young man that walks in, he has no dad at home, then he seems to glean to those who he feel that he can because the barbershop has always been a space for that type of where you can, it was like a counseling session almost where you can get information. And I think that today, over, well, not today, but literally like the last 15 or 20 years, it's been trending that way where the barbershop now doesn't have that same effect because there's a missing element of that older man that's in there actually, cutting hair nowadays.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So interject this real quick, and I think a lot of times we have to really be careful in this day and time not to get involved in lazy thinking
I
or not
agree.
thinking at all,
Yeah.
because people tend to share stuff on social media as if it's truth, and it's really their opinion, and they
That's
haven't
it.
really looked at
Right.
the facts of it, right?
Right.
I think somebody shared something on my Facebook page. I just happened to see it. I don't get on there as much, but anyway, they were saying that 90% of black men don't want to get married or are not married. Well, that's the statistically inaccurate.
Right.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? But it's a trending conversation at this point that's based
Right.
on an untruth, right? So, because when you look at the numbers, as it stands right now, some of the recent reports is, almost 34% of black men are married. Almost 50% are either married or have been married and maybe they're divorced now. So
Right.
it's a false narrative. So today it's even more important to engage in critical thinking to make sure that what we're even talking about is actually true,
Yeah.
or
I agree.
factually correct. You see what I'm saying? Otherwise, we start going down, rabbit trail and foolish conversations about falsity and falsehood, which further exacerbates the challenges that we have in our community. Because people now will share something controversial just for clicks, and because you hear it and because it's stated as fact, now it becomes a truth and it starts to spread viral. So, and this
Mhm.
is now people take that on because nobody wants to do the research.
Yeah.
And the thing about it is, it can't just be research based on what you like and what you don't like, or who you like and who you don't like. It has to be based on truth and fact, period. Especially as those of us who are believers. I think we should hold ourselves to a different standard as it relates
Mhm.
to how we handle people, whether it's people we like, love, or dislike, or maybe even indifferent to. It's just about truth with that, because where truth is, there's freedom with
Yeah.
that. So, I wanted to just put that piece out there that it's critical. Like, you can't even look at a picture now and count that as a real picture sometimes, because AI or people can deep fakes and all this stuff. It's a
Right.
very, 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 very interesting time that we live in, but it's very important that we take the time out to do our research to make sure, especially us being podcasters at this point, to make sure that what we're talking about is actually factually correct.
Right.
Yeah.
Correct.
Very good. I just want to inject one thing about the marriage.
I knew it was coming. I was just waiting.
There has to be a reasonable expectation um, from the man and the woman. And when you can get everything you want from the woman before marriage, and you can get that from multiple women, then
Mhm.
it puts you in a position where there's no desire to get married. And so it has to be the responsibility of the man, but also the woman to demand the respect and to set the limitation and expectations. And that's what happened with me and why I married who I married, because of the demand and the respect and the expectation. And that's who became my wife. So it's our responsibility as men to do what we're supposed to do, to seek out the woman that we want to marry, but also on the flip side, it's real loose nowadays, gentlemen. You can have multiples, and multiples don't care. You have women who don't mind being a side piece to a side piece to a side piece. And so, with that expectation, if you have a person who doesn't have a relationship with God or a strong relationship and just see marriage as something to be conveniently done to take care of me or something like that, then it won't be done. So there has to be a reasonable expectation.
I think that's good, and I think it points to the reason why it's important to tell our stories. We need to hear the stories of how we came from kings and queens, and even how
Mhm.
generationally we hear about how our great great grandparents and great grandparents and grandparents were married. So, talk to us a little bit. I'll start with you, Petway. Tell us a little bit about why it's important for us to share our stories. And I think it would be a good place for you to tell us a little bit about the story you share with us today, your family.
Right, right. I think with Black history, and it's getting scrutinized this year, ironically. But I think Black history is significant because of the impact that it had on the world, but more importantly, the United States. Um, the Black history, the Black man, the Black woman, the Black child helped create where we live today. I had the honor of going to a Alabama State University, a historically Black college. And no disrespect to anyone else, but when you go to a Black college, you leave with a different swagger.
That's
You leave
true.
with a different mindset, because the name is Alabama State now, but it started off as the college for for teachers for Negroes. So it started off as a place where this was the only place you can go to get educated. I had the opportunity to walk Tuskegee University, and we understand the foundation of that and the Tuskegee Airmen and how they helped shape different world wars. So I think our history is Black history. And I think the fact that, ironically, I received an email this morning from someone who was doing some research on genealogy, and she sent me a picture of my father with his brother on the ports in Gee's Bend, Alabama, in 1939. And she said, as she was doing these research, she came across it. She looked me up and she sent me the email. Then she sent me this article. on my grandfather, Nolan Petway, who I never got the opportunity to meet because he sent the family up here. He stayed down there, continued to sharecrop, and sent the money up here so his family can have a better life. And he died down there, and they had to go down there and had a funeral and everything. So I never got a chance to meet him. But as I was sharing with you guys earlier, he was born a slave on a plantation, my grandfather. So, with that being said, it has a certain impact on who I am and how I carry myself. Not knowing the history or seeing what happened, how it happened, or even stories of what happened, just news clippings and articles. Looking at the picture, he was 6'7". He had a large family, and the picture that I sent you guys was my father and his brother, overalls, no shoes, and they had just got through working in the field.
Wow.
And he decided to send his family up here. He ended up marrying my wife, my mom, and then the lineage goes on. Now I have 3 sons, and I had a family meeting with them yesterday because yesterday in Westland there was a Caucasian man standing outside of the Westland police station with a bunch of racial posters. Okay, so it's still prevalent in our world today. So my conversation with them was to understand where we live, how we have to operate, not wearing the badge of honor that we were slaves, not saying we're going to walk beneath anybody, but just understanding the history. And I told them about their grandfather last night. I told them about how their grandmother on my mother's side was born in Millersville, Georgia, on a plantation. And I always heard from my grandmother, and I think it stopped with our generation. You help me out, gentlemen, that you have to be 2 times better than a white man. That's what I always heard from my grandmother. And if you're going to be a street sweeper, be the best street sweeper you can be. Just be the best because you're a black man. And I think that stopped with me because I haven't told my children that per se. I told them they need to be successful. They need to be who they are. They're created in the image of God, super intelligent, just things like that. But I never physically said to them that you have to be 2 times better than a white man to even get anything. But that was the mentality. So I said all that to say the history that we have individually is the Black history. And if we share our stories with our families, we can continue to push it along in our communities. We're not the kings, we're not the civil rights activists who have the big names, but we have lineage and we have history that was relevant to the success of the United States of America. And I think that needs to be shared with our children and people around us.
That's good.
It is good.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot in that story as you were talking, Lindsberg. It just really made me think about, a lot of what we've been saying as far as being able to take accountability and take responsibility for, where our family are going to go. I think I may have shared something in our chat about an older, Black man talking about ownership, you know. So I was just thinking about the history of, Alabama State. I believe that college started in the 1800s.
1892.
1892. And it has progressed to become what it is today, despite all the challenges that we talk about. Major struggles back then. You know, so to me, that just speaks to the point that what we're capable of if we decide to unify and believe that we are great and believe and get to a place, I believe, as far as ownership. I know everybody may not be cut out to be an entrepreneur or something like that, but you can have a level of ownership in some way, shape, form, or fashion, or you can even participate in it. And I think once we get down to or back to a place, and maybe it still exists. I won't make it seem like nobody's thinking about that. But when we get to a place to where everybody's thinking ownership, whether taking ownership of my life, taking responsibility for the progress of my family, or even ownership in the American economy, then we begin to get back into a position of power or empowerment, as opposed to you know, a victim, if you will, or to a position of oppression. Because you don't necessarily have to be if you don't want to. And I was having a conversation with my daughter yesterday, and we've had some very pointed conversations over the last few months just about race and politics and stuff like that. And these are some of the things that we were, speaking of, just getting to a place of taking responsibility, being accountable, being the best you can be, not making excuses, being able to see those challenges, but not allowing them to be blockages. It's just hurdles that you may have to overcome. But, if we can jump higher, run faster, all that stuff, then okay, just do that. And don't make those challenges any bigger than what they need to be just because of how you think about them.
Good.
And I have to make a correction. I'm sorry, 1867.
Yeah.
Alabama State was established in 1867.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, that's
Let's
that's
see.
that's really good. Like my son goes to Tennessee State University, and I didn't go away to college. Which once I've been able to go 3 years with the experience of Tennessee State University, it's like I can actually see exactly what Lynchburg is talking about. Um, and on the day my son went to go do a tour, and as we were walking through the school, and as we met different advisors and football, like we met Eddie George, all of this. So you're meeting all these people, but the way they approached my son and the way that they spoke to my son was just showing him that, hey, man, this 4 years is you're knocking these 4 years out, right? So the conversation he had with the advisor was like, you're graduating on time. My son came in as an honor student, and they were like, and you're gonna stay on honor roll as an honor student all the way through. Just that the communication that you get from an HBCU was just so much different because I went to PWI and it was no care, right? It was like get your information. That's it. It was like get your information and get out of here. Where my son every day, someone's checking in on him. His RA, his he's got a mentor there. He's got a young mentor. He's got an older mentor. I mean, it's like so many facets that they're trying to put in, but it kind of goes to what me and Bo has was talking about. It was like, hey, accountability. That's what they hold at HBCUs. Hold every one of those students accountable for their actions, how they're going to behave, how they're going to operate. So the stories are definitely, there for us to tell. I just think we have to just tell them correctly and with truth, like Bo said. So
That's good. That's really good. So today actually is the last day of Black History Month, February 28th, 2025. So tell us why, start with Quentin and then Petway and then Bo. Share with us your sentiments and your thoughts about Black history as we wrap up Black History Month and, wrap up the conversation. Tell us your sentiments.
uh, it's just, I think just the way that we overpowered and overcame. Those stories of how we were able to do so many fantastic and great things, man, under that type of distress every single day. It's very impressive to me. It helps me stay grounded at what I do. It lets me know that I really don't have to pay attention to white noise. No point intended, but but I just don't have to. I don't have to pay attention to the white noise. My dad always told me when people are talking across the street, that's not the what are you getting angry about, right? They're talking across the street. Like I look at the young man that Lynchburg sent about, the signs and stuff. He's talking across the street. He's got a mask on, he's covering up. He's a coward. I don't have any time to worry about people who are cowardly. If you want to sit down with me and have a discussion face to face, that's what I want to do. But if you're being a coward, I don't have to give that any energy. That's a lot of energy to give
Mhm.
to. And so what I like is that back then we didn't have time to give energy to it. We were living it, but yet we still overcame. So that would probably be the biggest thing that I enjoy about Black History Month is that I get to continue to hear how we overcame and pressed through some of the worst times of people's lives ever. So
Yes. There's a quote that says, life can be only understood backwards, but it must be lived forward. So I think that the Black history narrative or conversation is necessary because we can understand so we can move forward. Very simple.
Good.
Yeah, man, I think that's absolutely phenomenal, and I love what you were talking about, Quentin, when you said giving things energy. I don't think a lot of people understand that what you give energy to, you're giving life to, and many things that should be dying off are kept alive because of the energy that we give to it. And if we would just refocus our energies into things that will move us forward, with the understanding of where we've come from, I think things will be great. Um, as far as Black history is concerned, I mean, I love Black history. I'm still learning Black history. I
Yeah,
mean, there are
a
so
lot.
many,
True.
so
Yep.
many
Exactly.
stories about, the things, the contributions, the personalities, that came from Black America. So I
Mhm.
love it. I love it. I mean, last year I went on a binge on Hulu, Netflix, and Prime. I was just watching all the stories of just Black excellence, and just the insurmountable odds and sometimes the lack of resources to actually perform at our highest level, and we still did
Mhm.
Yep.
it.
True.
I mean, it's amazing, right? Just the what's possible when you put your mind to something, which is another thing that mom used to tell us all the time. You can do whatever you put your mind to.
Mine
You know,
Yep.
and you have to add to that whatever you put your mind to, whatever you're equipped for. Uh,
Correct.
but
Correct.
uh, but I think Black history is great, and what I'd love to see is more and more people to not get distracted, as Brother Quentin was talking about, and not give energy to foolishness. Because it's just like the adage says, if you start arguing with a fool, people gonna start looking at you and wonder which one is which.
which one is which.
Um, and so we don't want to,
True.
we've got our challenges in the Black community, but we don't necessarily have to continue to speak to it. And I'll end with this a quote that I heard Bishop Jake say a long time ago. He says, "Why sit here yelling at the darkness when you can simply light a candle?" And that's
Mm,
what we should endeavor to be in this day and time, or candle bearers or light bearers, which is what we're called to do. Be the light
be the light.
in this world of darkness, even if it's coming from a lighter hue. It's all good. So, that's going to end our conversation today, guys. But before we go, we want to give our listeners an opportunity, Quinn, to learn about, how they can connect with you and your endeavors, how they can support you, and that. So let our listeners know about how they can connect.
Yes. You can reach me on all of these social media platforms at Quentin Crumbey or at Manology Project. And you can also keep your ears to the ground for our first summit that's going to be launching out here in June 7th. We're going to be at the Wayne State at the McGregor Conference Center. So that's June 7th. That's going to be a Saturday morning, 9 to 1. Men, get ready to come out and have a great conversation around how do we better ourselves. And then you can also check me out at my podcast, the Manology Project podcast, where we do the exact same thing, talk about men's health and wellness in all areas of their life. So thank you once again, gentlemen, for having me on for 3 rounds. I appreciate it.
Thank you,
Absolutely,
man. We
man.
enjoyed you.
Man, we appreciate you, man, coming on. So
Yeah, we
it's
enjoyed
great
you.
meeting you,
Appreciate
man,
it.
and great having this conversation with you. And to our listeners, this concludes another episode of The Lifeline with your hosts, BJE, Lensburg Petway, and Bo Powell. Don't forget to check us out at www.simplybje.com/The Lifeline and on social media. Look, we're on a mission. We want to bring light and life into your household, so join us and let us hear your feedback, because it's all about bringing life to you on The Lifeline. Y'all take care.
Thank you for listening to today's episode with host, business expert, and life coach Bo Powell, social media influencer and entrepreneur Lynnsburg Petway, and leadership coach and mental health advocate Barry J. Elliott. Join us next week for another impactful conversation on The Lifeline. God bless.